Senator, very good to see you. Your thoughts?
Neil, it's always good to be with you. You know, this is yet another manifestation of the failures of the Obama-Clinton-Kerry foreign policy. For 6 years, we followed the pattern of alienating and abandoning our friends and allies, and at the same time, coddling up to and appeasing those who are enemies of this country. And it's a consistent pattern. First, it was Russia, then it was Iran, now it's Cuba. This announcement today will be remembered as a tragic mistake. You know, Cuba was struggling. It was gasping for air. It has been relying on Venezuela with oil prices cratering. Venezuela is hurting economically, and just like the administration did with Iran, right when the administration was feeling the maximum pain, it throws them an economic lifeline and continues the brutal repression and dictatorship of the Castro brothers.
Well, you know, Senator, there are a lot of folks who look at it on both sides and say, well, what is 60 years of this wrought?
Well, what it has wrought is limiting the impact and harm of Cuba. There is a difference between countries that are friends, that are our allies, that are our trading partners. In Cuba, the Cuban government controls all of the money that comes in. If you bring money into the country, you have to transfer it into Cuban pesos, which enriches and empowers the dictatorship. It's also 90 miles away. Look, Cuba is an ally of North Korea. It is an ally of Iran. It is an ally of Venezuela. It is an avowed enemy of this country. You know, it was striking, the president's remarks. He talked about the Bay of Pigs invasion, but somehow completely omitted the Cuban Missile Crisis, somehow completely omitted an incredible threat to U.S. national security with nuclear weapons that were almost 90 miles off our shore. And it was sad to see both the president and John Kerry essentially blame America first. Blame America for the relation between the United States and Cuba. Look, the Castros are the ones who have decided to be brutal, repressive dictators. And we should not be taking blame for the fact that we responded to their active acts of war and hostility. They are a leading state sponsor of terrorism. And just like President Obama did with Russia, just like President Obama did with Iran, he does not understand the difference between our friends and our enemies.
Does it bother you that you're on the opposite side of the Pope on this one?
Well, look, there have been public reports to that effect. I certainly respect the Pope in his sphere of influence, but I will say this: when it comes to foreign policy and the national security interest of the United States, the president should be focused on exactly that, on protecting our national security interest. And this doesn't do that. You know, this is also reminiscent of the lousy deal that President Obama negotiated concerning Bo Bergdahl, where we released 5 Taliban terrorists. You know, likewise here, the president has now released 3 Cuban spies who were guilty of murdering 4 American citizens, of spying on Southern Command, on spying on our military bases, and that undermines national security. Now listen, we do have reason to celebrate. We should celebrate. We should give thanks for the release of Alan Gross. Alan Gross's imprisonment was tragic. It was wrong. It was a manifestation of the barbarity and oppression of this regime, and that is reason to celebrate. He is coming back, but we should have sought his release from a position of strength, not weakness, particularly because Cuba is dependent on Venezuela, and Maduro in Venezuela is essentially a petro-tyrant, and with oil prices falling, suddenly Venezuela is in economic chaos, even more so than they were before. Cuba is economically vulnerable right now, even beyond the disaster.
What would you do, Senator, now? I mean, the president has acted unilaterally on this. Apparently, he pulled a surprise. No one even knew this was coming. So what do you do? I mean, he wants to normalize this one, lift embargo. Eventually, you get all that and make it in the past. What are you going to do?
Well, I've been encouraged to see bipartisan condemnation of this bad deal. I was encouraged in particular to see my colleagues in the Senate, both Senator Rubio and Senator Menendez, a Republican and a Democrat, they like I, of Cuban-American descent, all in unison condemn this as a bad, bad deal. And I got to say, Neil, the pattern of bad deals is what we expect from this administration. You know, when President Obama first entered the White House, one of the first things he did was canceled the anti-ballistic missile batteries that were scheduled to go into Poland and the Czech Republic in an effort to appease Putin. Now, we've seen that appeasement didn't work as Putin's soldiers marched into Ukraine and invaded a sovereign nation.
What do you think he's up to then? What do you think he's up to then? With all these latest moves, post the midterms, whether it's on illegal immigration and to freeze deportations for millions, or even the things he's advancing right now on Keystone and all that's going on his own and never opened the thing, what have you, that he's taken a hard turn to act unilaterally in one event after another. What do you think is happening?
Listen, there's no doubt that this is a unilateral president who is exhibiting right now anger and defiance towards the American people. He is angry at this last election. He's angry at the tidal wave that retired Harry Reid, and he's acting in defiance of that. But it is also, you know, I'm reminded of what Ronald Reagan said about the hard left. He said, it's not what they don't know. It's that so much of what they know just isn't so. President Obama pioneered what he calls the foreign policy of leading from behind. And what that has meant is we haven't stood with our allies. We didn't stand with Ukraine, an ally that we had treaty commitments with when they were invaded by Russia. This administration has been the most antagonistic in history to the nation of Israel, a strong ally. Indeed, just a couple of weeks ago, there were reports the White House was considering sanctioning our friend and ally, the nation of Israel. That's wrong. We should be standing with our friends. But the flip side of it is this president believes appeasement works. So when it comes to dealing with tyrants and bullies, whether it is Putin, whether it is Khomeini in Iran, or whether it is the Castros in Cuba, he believes that a position of weakness is how we should negotiate. And that doesn't work. I believe in peace through strength. I think that's where most Americans are.